My name is Marina Holloway, 32 years old, and according to my family, I was never supposed to exist. They don't say it in those exact words, of course. They say it in little stories they laugh about at holidays. You were our surprise, my mom likes to say with that tight smile. We only planned for one, but then, there you were. They think it sounds cute. To me, it's always sounded like, we had a plan. You ruined it. The wildest part? My mom didn't even realize she was pregnant with me until she was nearly at the end of her pregnancy. By the time a doctor said, "You're having another baby," it was way too late for any other decision. I came into this world not as a dream, not as a plan, but as a default setting. And from as far back as I can remember, they made sure I understood that. I have an older sister, Vanessa. She's 3 years older than me, and, in my parents' eyes, she has always been the main character, the golden girl, the one they actually chose. If my childhood had a movie poster, Vanessa would be in the center, smiling in soft lighting. I'd be somewhere in the background, slightly out of focus, half cropped out of the frame. When Vanessa started school, my parents toured private academies with fountains in the courtyard and shiny brass plaques on the walls. When it was my turn, they shrugged and enrolled me in the local public school. "It's good enough," my dad said. "We can't afford 2 kids in private school." He didn't have to say the rest out loud. We made room for 1 star. You get the leftovers. The differences didn't stop there. Vanessa got ballet lessons, summer camps, tutoring when she struggled. I got hand-me-down shoes and a pat on the shoulder. "Marina's independent," Mom would say. "She doesn't need as much." The thing is, I did need something. I needed to feel wanted. I just stopped expecting that pretty early. High school was when it really started to hurt. Vanessa was already away at a fancy private high school, the kind with blazers and Latin mottos. I was the awkward kid wandering the halls of a crowded public school, keeping my eyes on the ground, trying to take up as little space as possible. I was shy, painfully shy, the kind of girl who ducked out of photos, who apologized when someone else bumped into her. Somewhere along the way, I'd internalized this idea that I was a mistake my parents had learned to live with. It's hard to stand tall when you're convinced you were never supposed to be here. But everything started to shift in my junior year. It didn't happen in some grand cinematic way. There was no speech, no magical teacher. It was just a table in the cafeteria that didn't chase me away. A group of kids, nerdy, loud, laughing way too much, waved me over one day because there was no other empty seat. Then they started asking about my classes, my interests. We bonded over video games and science fiction and the shared understanding that life was easier when you had people to sit with at lunch. They saw something in me I didn't. "You're actually really good at math," one of them said after we studied together. "Your code is cleaner than mine," another joked in computer class. Tiny comments. But when you've spent your life being the extra, even tiny things land like thunder. For the first time, I started to imagine that I could be more, not just the accident child, but someone who built something of her own. So I pushed myself. I started staying after school to ask questions in class. I redid assignments that weren't even graded anymore just to understand them better. I studied on weekends, but I also let myself go to the movies with my friends, sit in parking lots eating fries at midnight, laugh until my cheeks hurt. The balance worked. By the middle of junior year, my grades were climbing. By senior year, I was near the top of my class. My guidance counselor sat me down one afternoon and said, "Have you thought about applying to some of the bigger universities? With your scores, you might snag a scholarship." I remember going home that day, scholarship brochure in my backpack, heart pounding. My parents were at the table, my mom scrolling on her phone, my dad reading the news on his tablet. I put the brochure down, right in front of them. "Look," I said, keeping my voice steady, "there's a chance I could get a full ride for computer science, one of the top schools in the country." My dad glanced at it, then at me. "Computer science?" he repeated, like I'd said basket weaving. My mom sighed. "Are you sure you don't want to follow your sister into business? That's more practical." Vanessa, who'd come home for the weekend from her very expensive private program, laughed softly. "Yeah, Marina, business is where the money is. You're too smart to bury yourself in coding." Too smart, but not smart enough, apparently, to make my own choices. I got the scholarship anyway. A full ride, tuition, housing, the works. When the acceptance letter arrived, I opened it alone on the front steps, hands shaking, because I already knew that if I didn't get it, there wouldn't be any backup. My parents weren't shelling out for a second child's college. I screamed when I read it. For one brief, disorienting moment, I forgot about everything and just felt proud. When I burst into the kitchen, waving the letter, my mom gave me a half hug. "That's great, honey," she said. "And all for computers, huh?" My dad nodded. "If you change your mind, we can still talk to the counselor about business." They were ecstatic when Vanessa got into a business program. They took her out to a fancy dinner, bought her a new laptop, posted about it everywhere. When I left for my scholarship, my send-off was quieter. Cheaper luggage, a rushed trip to Target, a promise that you'll be fine, you've always been low maintenance. I told myself I didn't care. I lied. College was the beginning of two very different stories. Mine was about grinding. I moved into a cramped dorm, learned to stretch scholarship meal plans, spent long nights in the lab, blinking at glowing screens while everyone else seemed to be partying. But I was learning a language that made sense to me. Logic, structure, code. Computers didn't care if you were a planned child or not. They cared if you got it right. Vanessa's story went a different direction. At first, my parents bragged nonstop. "Vanessa's thriving," my mom would say on our rare phone calls. "She's so social. Everyone loves her." Then, slowly, the bragging turned into vague comments. "She's under a lot of stress. College is hard, especially for someone so sensitive." And then finally, the truth seeped through. Vanessa had fallen in with a wild crowd. The parties she'd loved so much became her whole life. There were whispered mentions of pills, lines on bathroom counters, missing classes. Her grades tanked. The call I remember most came in the middle of midterms. "Your sister's pregnant," my mom said, her voice brittle, "and her friend group has been a bad influence. She's had to leave school." She said friend group like it was a disease. She never once said, "Vanessa made bad choices." The girl Vanessa got pregnant, Sophie, was cut off by her own family. My parents, of course, stepped in like saviors. They let Sophie move in with them, made up the guest room, spoke about standing by Vanessa through this difficult time. When Vanessa's drug use escalated, they enrolled her in rehab. When she relapsed, they blamed stress. When she disappeared for 3 days once, they blamed her so-called friends. Through all of this, I was finishing assignments, passing finals, stacking up small victories no one seemed to notice. On the rare occasions I went home, the entire household revolved around Vanessa's chaos and the impending baby. I'd walk in with my laptop and my stories about being accepted into a competitive CS project, and it felt like I was bringing a paper airplane to a house fire. "It's just not a good time to talk about that," Mom would say, wiping away tears over Vanessa. So I stopped trying. The calls home became fewer, shorter. "How are classes?" "Fine." "How's your sister?" "Struggling. We're doing everything we can." They were always doing everything they could for Vanessa. For me, they'd done just enough. I don't know when exactly it happened, but one day I looked at my phone and realized I hadn't spoken to my parents in weeks, then months. It wasn't a clean break, it was a gradual fade out, like a song turning down in the background while you learn a new melody. At some point, without saying the words out loud, I made a quiet promise to myself. If I ever built a real life, one that felt like mine, it wouldn't be anchored to the people who spent years reminding me I was never supposed to be here. I didn't know then that one day they'd come looking for me again. Not because they missed me, because they finally realized the surprised child had become the only one who could save them. After college, life finally felt like it belonged to me. I graduated with my computer science degree, clutching that diploma like it was a passport out of everything that had ever made me feel small. Within a few weeks, I landed my first real job, a junior developer position at a mid-sized tech company that smelled like coffee and whiteboard markers and other people's ambition. It wasn't glamorous. The office chairs squeaked, the code base was a mess, and my starting salary wasn't anything you'd scream about online, but it was mine. My apartment was tiny, my furniture mismatched, but every bill that got paid had my name on the paycheck behind it. My parents weren't impressed. When I called to tell them about the job, my dad's response was, "Well, as long as it pays your rent." My mom's was, "Are you sure there's room to grow in computers? Business has more options, you know." I stopped bringing them good news after a while. Good news felt pointless if it just bounced off a wall. Meanwhile, updates about my sister were constant, even when I didn't ask. Vanessa had dropped out entirely. Vanessa was trying to get back on her feet. Vanessa was under a lot of pressure. Vanessa was sick, not bad. Every story was another excuse laid gently at her feet like a rug so she didn't have to touch the ground. I'd ask, "How's Sophie?" My mom would say, "She's fine. She's lucky we're here to help." I always wondered what Sophie felt about that, being described like a charity project, while carrying the entire weight of Vanessa's choices and a baby on her hip. In the years that followed, the distance between me and my parents went from uncomfortable to normal. At first, I kept trying. I called once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month. The conversations were always the same. "How's work?" "Fine." "How's your sister?" "She's struggling, but we're doing everything we can." We, of course, never included me. I wasn't asked for help. I wasn't really included in decisions. I was just the voice on the other end of the line who nodded and said, "Uh-huh," until my battery ran low. One day I woke up and realized I didn't want to make that call anymore. It wasn't some dramatic revelation, it was just exhaustion, a quiet, heavy kind. So I didn't call, and they didn't either. No one checked if I'd gotten home safe from work. No one asked how my day was. The silence between us stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like the natural state of things. That was when I started pouring everything into something that did answer back, my work. Around my 3rd year in the industry, a couple of friends from college reached out about an idea. We met up in a cramped cafe, laptops out, coffee cooling untouched as they laid it out. A product they believed could actually stand out in the mess of startups. I remember staring at the wireframes on the screen and feeling that old familiar spark from high school, the what if feeling. What if we did this? What if it worked? What if I could build something that was truly, undeniably mine? So I jumped. We quit our safe jobs one by one. We rented a cheap office space above a nail salon that always smelled faintly of acetone. We lived on instant noodles and takeout and the kind of adrenaline you can only justify in your 20s. The days blurred into nights. And somewhere in that chaos, I met Noah. He wasn't loud like some of the guys in tech. He didn't try to impress me with jargon or act like his work was more important than everyone else's. He just showed up, consistent, kind, steady. We met at a mutual friend's game night. He listened when I talked about code and product launches like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. He didn't flinch when I mentioned my complicated family. He just asked gentle questions and slid another slice of pizza onto my plate. We started dating. We moved in together. We had arguments in Swedish furniture stores and laughed about them later on the floor, surrounded by half-assembled bookshelves. When he proposed, it wasn't some grand, staged moment. It was a quiet evening, both of us in sweatpants, takeout on the table, my laptop open with a half-broken build. He slid a ring box into the mess of sticky notes and said, "Since we're already building everything else together, will you marry me?" I did. And for the first time, family stopped being a word that tasted bitter in my mouth. We got married in a small ceremony with friends and coworkers and people who actually liked us, not out of obligation, but out of choice. My parents weren't there. Neither was Vanessa. At the time, it hurt less than it should have. They felt like characters in a story I used to read. When our first child was born, a little boy with my eyes and Noah's sleepy smile, the entire axis of my world tilted. Holding him in the hospital, I realized something that made my throat close up. He would never have to wonder if he was a mistake. In those moments, the anger I'd carried around for years softened a little. Not for my parents' sake, but for mine. My life was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. The company grew slowly, then suddenly. We made it through our first year by the skin of our teeth. The second year was different. We landed 2 major clients. Numbers went from red to stubborn gray to slow, steady black. We hired people. We rented a bigger office that didn't smell like nail polish. Then came the interview. A local business show wanted to feature us, young entrepreneurs breaking through in tech. I almost said no. I hate being on camera. But my co-founders insisted, and eventually, I found myself sitting under harsh studio lights, microphone clipped to my jacket, telling the story of how we started with nothing but an idea and a ridiculous amount of stubbornness. It aired on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, my phone was a war zone. There were congratulations from old classmates, excited messages from colleagues, even a couple of emails from investors who suddenly wanted to talk. And then there were the names I didn't expect to see. Mom, Dad, Vanessa. My stomach dropped. First came the text from my mother. "We saw your interview. So proud of you, sweetie. You were amazing. We always knew you'd do something big. We love you so much. Come over for dinner this weekend?" Proud, love, dinner. 3 words that had never really existed in the same sentence before. Then my dad. "You've done well for yourself. Congratulations. Let's catch up soon. It's been too long." Then, shockingly, Vanessa. Hey, long time. Saw you on TV. You looked different. Happy for you. That last one made my chest ache in a way I wasn't ready to examine. My first instinct was to ignore them, block the numbers, delete the messages, and go back to the life I'd built without them. But the human brain is cruel. Once the idea enters, what if you went? It doesn't leave quietly. So I imagined it, walking into my childhood home in a nice outfit, car keys from my successful life dangling in my hand, sitting at their table, answering their questions with calm confidence, watching their faces when they realized the kid they treated like an afterthought had become the one with resources, the one with power. I imagined them asking for money, because of course they would. Why else reach out now? And then I imagined saying no. It was petty, it was vindictive, but it was honest. One night, sitting on the couch while Noah folded baby laundry, I said, "They invited us for dinner." He didn't look up right away. "Your parents?" "Yeah," I hesitated. "I kind of want to go, but not for them. For me, just to show them. I don't plan to give them anything, not a cent." Noah put down the tiny socks. His jaw tightened. "So you want to go rub your success in their faces while they're desperate," he said slowly. "On purpose." I bristled. They made my life hell. They ignored me. They threw everything at Vanessa and left me to figure it out. Now that I'm on TV, suddenly they remember I exist. Why shouldn't I let them sit with that? He ran a hand through his hair. "Because that's not who you are, Marina." The words lodged under my skin like splinters. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't lecturing. He was just disappointed. And somehow that hurt more. He shook his head. "I'm not saying you should bail them out. I'm not even saying you should forgive them. But going just to watch them squirm? That's not justice. That's sport." I hated that he had a point. So I did what any emotionally conflicted millennial with Wi-Fi would do. I went to Reddit. I typed out the story, minus the names, plus the shame, and asked the internet if I'd be the jerk for going to my family's dinner just to show off, fully intending not to help them financially. The comments came in fast. Some people said, "Do it. They deserve to see what they lost." Others said, "Your husband's right. Don't become what hurt you." A few called me out harder than I expected, saying that revenge might feel good for 5 minutes, and then rot everything afterward. I read every single one. Finally, after hours of scrolling and a long, messy cry in the bathroom, I shut my laptop with a shaky laugh. "Eff it," I whispered. "I'm going." Not just to flex, not just to forgive. I didn't even know why yet. I just knew I needed to look these people in the eye again, if only to see what exactly I was walking away from. When I showed Noah the comments, he sighed, shoulders relaxing just a little. At the end of the day, he said quietly, "It's your call. I'll back you up, whatever you decide. Just don't let them turn you into someone you're not." "I won't," I said. I hoped I was telling the truth. We agreed to go together. On the day of the dinner, we picked up snacks. Cookies for the kids I hadn't met yet, some fruit, a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. It felt like packing for some strange, emotional expedition. Standing in front of my parents' house hours later, diaper bag in one hand, grocery bag in the other, Noah beside me, I stared at the front door I'd once slammed as a teenager. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wasn't the accident child on their couch anymore. I was a wife, a mother, a founder. And whether this dinner turned into closure or disaster, one thing was certain. I wasn't the one who needed saving anymore. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened before I could take my next breath. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It wasn't even Vanessa. It was Sophie. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. I had only ever seen her in filtered social media photos from years ago, smiling, glowing, standing beside my sister at some campus party before everything came crashing down. But the woman in front of me was different. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with shadows that looked older than she was. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, strands falling out like she didn't have the energy to fix them. She wore a clean but worn t-shirt, one I suspected had been washed more times than it should have been. And yet, she smiled at me, a small, strained smile that somehow still had warmth underneath. "Oh, Marina," she said, sounding almost surprised. "Hi, it's been a while." "Yeah," I breathed, "it has." Before I could say anything else, small footsteps thundered toward us. A little girl, maybe 4 or 5, ran out from behind Sophie, clutching a plastic dinosaur in one hand. Without hesitation, she shoved it into my free hand. I froze. It was such a simple gesture. Children don't calculate. They don't judge. They don't choose affection based on family politics. She just saw a stranger and wanted to share her toy. My throat tightened. Thank you, I whispered. Sophie stepped aside. Come in. They're in the living room. The house looked the same. The same beige carpet my mother never replaced. The same family photos lining the hallway. Except now, Vanessa's pictures dominated the walls even more. Pageant poses, graduation portraits, baby bumps, a shrine of carefully curated memories. I didn't see a single photo of me past the age of 12. Noah's hand brushed mine. He squeezed gently, a reminder that I wasn't here alone anymore. We stepped into the living room, and there they were. My father sitting stiffly, my mother perched on the edge of the couch, Vanessa leaning against the wall like she was holding it up. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. 3 practiced smiles appeared like synchronized swimmers, surfacing for a routine. Marina, my mother breathed, standing. Honey, it's so good to see you. I could feel Noah watching me, waiting to see how I would respond. I managed a polite smile. Hi, Mom. The air crackled with awkwardness. We exchanged slow greetings, the kind filled with too many words and no substance. They complimented Noah, complimented my clothes, complimented the snacks we brought like we were attending a potluck instead of stepping into unresolved emotional debris. We sat down, coffee already poured. My father pushed a mug toward me like this was a regular Sunday morning. So, he said, clearing his throat, you've really done well for yourself. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. I've been working hard. Vanessa scoffed softly from her corner. Yeah, we saw. Her tone wasn't quite hostile, not quite friendly either, just brittle, like she was afraid I might break something she was barely holding together. The conversation ambled awkwardly from topic to topic. My business, our child, the weather, updates about distant relatives I didn't remember. I watched my parents' faces carefully, the sweetness, the forced brightness, the kind of niceness that felt like wrapping paper over a bomb. Finally, my mom inhaled sharply, as if bracing herself. You know, she said gently, life has taken you and your sister down such different paths. My stomach tightened. Here it comes. We're just worried, she continued. It breaks our hearts to see one daughter soaring while the other is struggling so much. I had expected manipulation. I had expected guilt. I hadn't expected those words. Something inside me cracked at the absurdity. I laughed. Not a polite giggle, not a soft exhale. A full, sharp, involuntary laugh. My mother flinched. Why are you laughing? Because, I said, wiping my eyes. It's ironic. When I was struggling, no one's heart broke. When I was drowning in loneliness, trying to earn my entire future, nobody threw a family dinner to rescue me. Silence slammed into the room. Vanessa straightened. That's not fair. No? I said, the laugh dying into something colder. When you dropped out and got pregnant, you had a room ready for Sophie, rehab funded, meals cooked, an entire ecosystem designed to catch your fall. When I left for college, I had a duffel bag and, good luck, don't pick computer science. My father leaned forward. Marina, that's not... Please, I cut him off. Let's not pretend we all lived in the same house. Sophie was frozen in the doorway, watching, her hands trembling around a dish towel. My mom's voice wavered. We just want to help your sister get back on her feet. She deserves a chance. I stared at them. And you think that chance should come from me? My father sighed, like he'd been waiting for the cue. We thought... He hesitated. Maybe you could give Vanessa a job. At your company. Something stable. Something that gives her dignity again. There it was, the ask. The reason for the sudden love, the urgency, the dinner. My mother whispered, think of the children. Noah looked at me, ready to intervene if I needed him. I took a slow breath. Okay, I said, I can offer her something. My parents brightened instantly. But, I continued, it would be an entry-level role. Low pay, hard work, no special treatment. Their faces fell. My father frowned. Entry-level? She's your sister. She needs a management position. She has 2 kids. She has no qualifications, I said. An addiction recovery is not a resume. If she wants to work for me, she starts like everyone else. My mother's lips tightened. That's humiliating. It's honest. You owe her more. I owe her nothing, I said, my voice quiet but razor sharp, and I owe myself the peace of not letting someone else burn down the company I built because you think she deserves shortcuts. Years of swallowed feelings surfaced in my chest like wildfire. I am not your safety net, I said, and I am not your ATM. A hush settled so thick it was suffocating. I stood. Noah stood with me. And then I remembered the envelope. I reached into my bag and pulled it out. Crisp, smooth, white, a symbol more than an item. I set it in the center of the table. What's this? My father asked. Everything you need to know about how I got here, I said softly. Every day I worked, every loan I didn't have, every time you looked at Vanessa's future like it was a glass sculpture and treated mine like a leftover project. It's all in there. My mother swallowed. Marina. I shook my head. No, I'm done explaining. I'm done trying to earn the love you only had available when you needed something. Noah squeezed my hand, guiding me toward the door. We gave the children their bag of treats. Cookies, coloring books, little toys. They hugged my legs like they'd known me for years. We stepped outside into the cool air. I felt light, empty, free, terrified. Marina! I turned. It was Sophie. She ran after us, breathless, and pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. Her fingers trembled. On it was a phone number, and 3 shaky words. I need help. The front door slammed behind her. I stared at the note, my pulse roaring in my ears. Noah touched my shoulder. Are you okay? I wasn't, because this wasn't the manipulative demand my parents had handed me. This was real, raw, desperate. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know what to do. He didn't push, didn't decide for me. He just nodded, his voice steady. Whatever you choose, he said. You don't have to do it alone. I stared at the door of the house I no longer belonged to, Sophie's note burning in my hand. For the first time all evening, I felt something that wasn't anger. Responsibility, compassion, and the terrifying possibility of becoming part of someone else's escape. I think, I said slowly, I need to call her. Noah nodded once. Then we will. I exhaled shakily. The night felt heavy, full of consequences. But something inside me, something I thought they'd crushed out of me years ago, stirred awake. Hope. I called Sophie the next morning. I waited until Noah took our son to the park, waited until the house was quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. My palms were sweating so hard I nearly dropped the phone twice before finally pressing call. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was small, carefully neutral, the kind of voice someone uses when they expect bad news. It's me, I said gently. It's Marina. For a moment there was silence, then the sound of a single, shaky exhale. You called, she whispered. I did, I swallowed. Tell me what you meant last night. Another pause, a long one, like she had to figure out where to start. Then her voice cracked. I can't do this anymore, she said. I want to leave. I've wanted to leave for years, but I don't have the money, or childcare, or anything. I feel trapped. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the edge digging into my spine. Not anger, not pity, just clarity. Tell me what you need, Sophie. I need a job, she said. Any job. I need to earn enough to leave, enough to get a lawyer, enough to give my kids a chance. Her breath hitched. I just need one person in this family to help me without strings attached. The words hit me harder than I expected. Without strings attached. Because everything my parents offered Vanessa came with ropes, nets, chains, all designed to keep her exactly where they wanted. But Sophie wasn't Vanessa. Sophie had been a casualty of Vanessa's chaos, a ghost in my parents' home, a placeholder in a story that never belonged to her. And somehow she still stood there, still fighting for a different ending. Okay, I said softly. Come in next Monday. We'll figure out a role for you. Really? She whispered, as if afraid the word would shatter. Really, but Sophie... Yes? This isn't charity. You're going to work hard, and I'm not going to shield you from that. She let out a breath that sounded like a sob and a laugh at the same time. I can work. I can do anything. I just need a chance. You have one, I said. It was the first decision I'd made about my family in years that didn't come from anger. It came from the memory of that little girl handing me a dinosaur and smiling like she didn't know the world could be cruel. Sophie came in Monday morning. She was nervous. Her hands kept twisting the strap of her bag, but she was focused, determined. I started her as a junior admin assistant, lowest rung, no shortcuts, no illusions. To my surprise, she didn't flinch. She dove in. Within weeks, she was staying late without being asked, learning processes faster than some full-timers. She took notes like a court stenographer, remembered details, anticipated needs. 3 months in, she'd become indispensable. My co-founders kept asking where I found her. I didn't know how to explain that sometimes the people you overlook are the best ones you could ever bring into your life. Meanwhile, privately, Sophie saved every dollar she could. She bought a binder, filled it with documents, printed emails, gathered evidence, prepared. She was building a case against her marriage, against the life she'd been forced into, against the idea that she was trapped. One afternoon after a long meeting, she sat across from me in my office, twisting a pen. I'm not ready yet, she said softly. For the lawyer. but I will be. I know, I told her. And when that day comes, we'll make sure you're ready. But that wasn't the only change. Sophie wasn't the same timid woman I'd seen at my parents' door. She was getting stronger, standing taller, laughing more easily. And her kids, the little girl and her younger brother, they were thriving too. When they visited the office, they ran around like they owned the place, smiles bright, eyes clear. For the first time, they were growing up in a space without tension vibrating in the walls. And that alone made everything worth it. Months passed. And then, when life had settled into its quiet new order, another storm came. One evening, Sophie and the kids were at our house for dinner. Noah was helping them build a fort in the living room while I stirred pasta on the stove. Everyone was laughing. It felt peaceful, warm, simple, until the knock at the door. A hard knock. A familiar one. I felt the hairs rise on my arms. Noah went to answer it, and I heard his voice. "Oh, Vanessa." My heart plummeted. When I walked into the living room, she was standing there, smaller than I remembered, sober for the first time in years, looking at Sophie like she was either going to collapse or fall to her knees. "Sophie," she whispered. Sophie froze, completely still. The kids clung to her legs. "I'm not here to take them," Vanessa said quickly. "I swear, I need to talk to you." Her hands were shaking violently. Sophie's voice was cold. "Say what you need to say." Vanessa swallowed, tears gathering. "I'm clean," she said. 64 days. I've been going to meetings. I'm actually trying this time, Sophie. I know I ruined everything. I know you had to carry it all, but I want to be better for them." Her eyes flicked to the kids. And for myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophie looked at the woman who had broken her trust over and over. The mother of her children. The partner who vanished whenever things got hard. Finally, Sophie spoke. "You can see them," she said, "but only supervised, and only if you stay clean." Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. "Okay, anything. Thank you." The moment wasn't magical. It wasn't a forgiveness arc. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was a beginning. A fragile, trembling beginning. Word spread fast. My parents heard about Vanessa's sobriety within days. Suddenly, they were praising her again, flooding her with encouragement and pride. Normally, it would have nauseated me. But this time, if it kept her going, kept her clean, kept her alive, fine. Let them drown her in praise. I could live with that, because life was changing. My company was exploding with new contracts. Sophie moved up to a project coordinator role. The kids had stability. Vanessa was trying. My parents were cautious but softer around me. And Noah was the steady center of everything good in my world. Then, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, while we were reorganizing our son's toys, Noah took my hand and placed it over my stomach. "I think," he whispered, smiling, "we should buy another crib." I blinked, then laughed, then cried. A second child. A second chance to build a family the right way. Not perfect, not painless, but real. That night, lying in bed with his hand resting protectively over my belly, I realized something. I had gone to that dinner ready to burn bridges, ready to prove something, ready to walk away victorious. Instead, I walked away responsible for more than myself. For Sophie, for the kids, for my sister's chance at recovery, for turning pain into something that resembled a future. Family wasn't the house I grew up in. It wasn't the people who pretended to love me only when it was convenient. Family was the one I built, the one I chose, the one I helped grow, piece by piece, out of broken history. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole.